Amma was known in her town for her beauty, her sharp tongue, and her quick temper. People admired her for her boldness, but they also feared the way she spoke when she was angry. She walked through the streets every day with her head held high, her fine clothes swaying, her shoes clicking on the stone roads. To Amma, the world seemed like a stage where she had to look strong at all times. She hated weakness, and she never wanted anyone to think they could push her aside. The marketplace that day was full of life. Sellers shouted prices of fruits, fish, and cloth. The air smelled of roasted corn and fried plantain. Drums played in the distance, mixing with the sound of chatter and laughter. People pushed through the narrow paths, each trying to get their share of goods before sunset. Children ran between the stalls, chasing each other, while mothers called after them. Amma walked quickly, her eyes sharp and her steps firm. She had errands to run, and she did not like wasting time. As she moved through the crowd, an elderly woman carrying a basket of vegetables stumbled and brushed against her shoulder. The woman's basket tilted, and a few tomatoes rolled onto the ground. She bent slowly, her hands trembling as she tried to pick them up. But Amma's pride rose like fire. She turned sharply and glared at the old woman. "Can't you watch where you are going?" she snapped. Her voice cut through the noise of the market. Some people stopped to look. The old woman, her back bent with age and her hair gray beneath her headscarf, lifted her eyes softly. "My child, forgive me. The crowd pushed me. I did not mean." Before she could finish, Amma's anger burst. Without thinking, she raised her hand and slapped the woman across the face. The sound cracked like a whip in the air. Gasps spread through the market. Sellers dropped their goods, and even the children froze where they stood. The drums seemed to quiet in the distance. All eyes turned to Amma and the old woman. Whispers spread from mouth to mouth like wildfire. "Did you see that?" one woman murmured. "She slapped an elder," another said, covering her mouth in shock. "What disrespect," a man added, shaking his head. The old woman did not fight back. She did not shout or curse. She simply placed her wrinkled hand on her cheek and looked at Amma with eyes full of sorrow. There was no anger in her gaze, only a sadness that pierced deeper than any words. For a moment, Amma felt a flicker of unease. But her pride would not let her show weakness. She folded her arms and raised her chin. "Next time, walk carefully," she said coldly, then turned to continue on her way. Yet as she moved, the crowd did not cheer her boldness. Instead, people stepped back, giving her space not out of respect, but out of disappointment. Some shook their heads. Others whispered, their voices low but heavy with judgment. Amma could feel their eyes on her, burning into her back as she walked away. For the first time, her pride did not feel like a shield, it felt like a heavy stone pressing on her chest. The old woman slowly gathered her vegetables, her hands trembling. A kind stranger helped her, but the woman's eyes never left Amma's back. There was something in that gaze, something that Amma could not shake off. She left the market, but the sound of the slap seemed to echo in her mind. The crowds gasped, the old woman's soft voice, the sadness in her eyes, all of it followed her like shadows. She told herself it was nothing, that she had only defended herself from disrespect. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that she had made a mistake. That night, as Amma lay on her bed, she tried to sleep, but her mind replayed the scene again and again. The more she tried to forget, the clearer it became. The wrinkled face. The basket of tomatoes rolling onto the ground. The sorrow in those eyes. For the first time in a long while, Amma felt something she did not like to feel, guilt. She turned from side to side, restless. The silence of the night seemed heavier than the noise of the market. Somewhere in the dark, she wondered who the old woman really was. And deep in her heart, Amma did not know that the slap she gave that day would soon return to change her life forever. The old woman did not shout. She did not argue. She simply lowered her gaze, pressed her lips together, and picked up the last tomato that had rolled away. With her basket in hand, she turned slowly and walked away from the market crowd. Her steps were steady, but her silence was louder than any words. People watched her leave, shaking their heads. Some whispered prayers for her, others muttered about Amma's pride. Amma, still standing tall, brushed her clothes as if nothing had happened. She lifted her chin and walked away from the crowd. To her, the incident was finished. She told herself she had done nothing wrong. The old woman should have been more careful, she thought. "It is over," she whispered to herself as she made her way home. But it was not over. By the next morning, the story of what had happened in the marketplace had spread across the town. Children repeated it while playing. Women at the wells discussed it as they fetched water. Men at the roadside stalls shook their heads as they told the tale again and again. "Did you hear? Amma slapped an old woman in public," they said. Some added their own words, making it sound even harsher than it had been. In every corner of the town, Amma's name was now spoken with judgment. Her friends were the first to change. Women who once called her to sit with them now crossed the street when she came near. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now nodded coldly, their eyes sharp. Even her own cousins avoided her at family gatherings, pretending to be busy whenever she entered the room. Amma noticed it all. She felt the weight of their judgment pressing on her shoulders. At first she tried to ignore it. She walked with her usual pride, her head lifted high, her steps strong. But wherever she went, whispers followed. When she entered the market again, sellers looked at her differently. Some stopped calling out their prices when she passed, as if punishing her with silence. Others spoke in low voices, but Amma knew they were talking about her. At home the change was even harder to bear. Her younger brother, who once admired her confidence, now avoided her questions. Her aunt shook her head and said, "Amma, what you did was not right. The old deserve respect." Those words stung, though Amma pretended not to care. She forced a smile and replied, "It was nothing, Auntie. People are making it bigger than it is." But deep inside, her heart trembled. At night, the quiet became unbearable. She lay awake on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The old woman's face returned in her thoughts again and again. Those eyes, sad but calm, haunted her. Amma turned from side to side, but sleep refused to come. She pressed her hands over her ears as if she could block the whispers of the town that echoed in her head. Day by day, her pride began to weaken. She walked through the market more quickly now, avoiding eye contact. The sellers no longer waved at her. Children no longer smiled when she passed. Even the tailor, who once praised her beauty every time she came by, no longer greeted her with excitement. Everywhere she went, she carried the invisible mark of shame. Amma tried to hide it. She told herself she was still strong, that she did not care what people thought. But when she sat alone in her room, her chest grew heavy. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. One afternoon, as she walked through the streets, she overheard two women talking nearby. They did not know she was close enough to hear. "Such pride," one woman said. "How could she strike an elder in front of everyone?" "She has no respect," the other replied. "Now look, everyone has turned away from her." The words pierced Amma's heart. She wanted to shout, to defend herself, but her throat tightened. She lowered her head and walked faster, ashamed. That evening her closest friend Esi came to visit. But even she looked troubled. Sitting across from Amma, she sighed deeply before speaking. "Amma," she said softly, "people are hurt by what you did. It is not just the slap. It is the way you showed no remorse. Even if you were angry, she was old. People cannot forget what they saw." Amma's hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to argue, but tears burned her eyes. "I only defended myself," she whispered. "Why should I be punished for that?" Esi shook her head. "Sometimes strength is not in striking back. Sometimes strength is in patience and respect. Think about it, my sister." After Esi left, Amma sat alone in silence. For the first time, she admitted to herself that shame had crept into her heart. She tried to bury it under pride, but it grew stronger every day. Still, she did not know the full truth. She did not know who the old woman really was, or why fate had placed her in Amma's path. That truth was still waiting, hidden just beyond her reach. And when it came, it would shake Amma's life more than the whispers of the town ever could. Days later, Amma woke up to a knock at her door. It was her cousin Kwaku, looking uneasy. "The chief has called for a community gathering," he said. "Everyone must come." Amma frowned. She rarely went to such meetings, but this time the summons was direct. With a mixture of curiosity and worry, she dressed quickly and walked to the town square. The place was full. Men, women, and children sat in circles, their faces eager and expectant. The drums beat slowly, marking the importance of the gathering. As Amma found her place at the edge of the crowd, her eyes fell on someone seated near the front, in a chair reserved for honored guests. Her stomach tightened. It was the same old woman she had slapped in the marketplace. Amma froze. The memory of that day rushed back like a wave. The whispers, the shame, the cold stares of neighbors, all of it returned. But this moment was even worse. The old woman was not sitting quietly in the crowd as she had before. She sat tall, wrapped in a fine cloth, her gray hair tied neatly, her eyes calm yet powerful. Around her, elders bowed their heads with respect. Children kept close to her, as if drawn to her gentle presence. Amma's heart began to pound. She whispered to herself, "Why is she here? Why is she seated there?" Her question was answered moments later. The chief of the town, dressed in rich Kent cloth, stood before the gathering. He raised his hand and silence swept across the crowd. His voice was deep and steady. "Today," he said, "we honor one who has long served our people with wisdom and kindness. She has been a guide in times of trouble, a healer of broken hearts, and a light for our children. For many years her steps have grown slower, and she has not walked often among us. But she is here today. Let us honor Mame Efua." Gasps spread across the crowd. Murmurs rose. People clapped their hands in respect. Some bent their heads. Amma's breath caught in her throat. Mame Efua. The name struck her like thunder. She had heard it all her life. Stories of the wise elder who solved disputes when even chiefs struggled. Tales of her kindness, how she gave food to the hungry, how she prayed for sick children, how she helped orphans find homes. Everyone knew her name. But Amma had never seen her face closely until the day of the market. Her pride crumbled inside her chest. She realized now why the whole town had reacted so strongly to her slap. It had not been just any old woman. It had been Mame Efua, the heart of the community. Amma's hands shook as she pulled her shawl tighter. People around her turned their heads, some whispering again. A few eyes darted between Amma and Mame Efua. They all knew. The story of the slap had already spread, and now it carried even greater weight. The chief continued speaking, praising Mame Efua for her years of service. Amma could not hear the words clearly. Her ears buzzed, her chest heavy with shame. She wanted to run away, but her legs felt nailed to the ground. When the chief finished, Mame Efua rose slowly from her chair. Despite her age, her back was straight, her presence strong. She looked around the crowd, her eyes calm, her lips curved in a soft smile. Then, to Amma's horror, her gaze settled directly on her. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Amma lowered her head, unable to meet those eyes. "Come forward, my daughter," Mame Efua said gently. Her voice carried across the square, steady and kind. The crowd turned to look at Amma. Murmurs filled the air again. Some shook their heads, others leaned closer, eager to see what would happen next. Amma's legs trembled as she stood. Each step toward the front felt heavy, like walking through water. When she finally reached Mame Efua, she fell to her knees without thinking. Tears blurred her vision. "Forgive me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I did not know who you were. I was foolish and my pride blinded me." Mame Efua placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Child," she said softly, "it is not about who I am. Respect is not for names or titles alone. It is for age, for wisdom, for the life that came before yours. You did not wound me because you did not know me. You wounded yourself because you forgot this truth." The word struck Amma's heart deeply. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and her sobs echoed in the quiet crowd. The chief stepped forward, nodding. "Let this be a lesson for us all," he said. "Pride can make us blind, but humility restores our sight. Amma has made her mistake before all of us. Let her also rise with dignity, learning from this moment." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some faces softened, others nodded. For the first time since the marketplace, Amma felt a small opening in the wall of judgment around her. She bowed her head lower. "Thank you," she whispered to Mame Efua. The old woman helped her rise. "Go and live with humility, my daughter," she said. "That will be your true strength." Amma stood, still trembling, but a new light flickered in her heart. The shame was not gone, but it had turned into something else, a heavy lesson that would guide her life from that day forward. As she walked back to her place in the crowd, the whispers followed her again. But this time they were different. Some still judged, but others spoke with understanding. A few even nodded at her with quiet respect, as if they had seen her grow in that single moment. For Amma, the journey was not finished. But the truth of who the old woman really was had opened her eyes. She knew now that the path ahead would be harder, but it would also lead her toward becoming someone new. Amma stood trembling before the old woman. The entire town square had gone silent, waiting to hear what Mame Efua would say. The old woman's hands rested gently on her lap, her face calm, her eyes steady. She was not angry. She did not raise her voice. Instead, she spoke slowly, and her words carried weight heavier than stone. "My child," Mame Efua began, "a person's heart is shown in the little things. A smile offered in kindness, a word spoken in anger, a hand raised in peace, or a hand raised in violence. These things show who we are inside. That day in the marketplace you chose anger. You let your pride lead you. And in doing so, you revealed your heart to the people." The crowd listened closely. Some nodded, others bowed their heads in thought. Amma felt her knees weaken. Every word cut through her pride, but she could not turn away. Her eyes filled with tears as she lowered her head. Mame Efua continued, her voice calm but firm. I do not stand here to shame you, Amma. You are young and youth is often quick to anger. But let me tell you this, anger can burn down a house faster than fire. Pride can destroy friendships, families, even whole communities. That is why we must be slow to speak, slow to strike, and quick to forgive. Her words struck Amma deeper than any punishment ever could. She had expected the old woman to curse her, to demand the chief punish her before the people. She thought perhaps she would be humiliated or cast out. But instead, Mame Efua was teaching her, guiding her as a mother would guide a child. Amma's chest tightened. She felt both ashamed and strangely relieved. She whispered, I was foolish. I thought only of myself. Yes, Mame Efua said gently, and many of us have done the same. But the question is, what will you do after? Will you remain foolish or will you grow wise? The chief, who stood nearby, nodded in agreement. Wisdom is born not from never falling but from rising after we fall, he said. Amma lifted her eyes slowly. She saw Mame Efua's face more clearly now. The woman's gaze held no anger, only patience. It was as though she could see straight into Amma's soul. The shame Amma carried began to feel different. It was no longer just a heavy burden. It was becoming a lesson. The people in the crowd watched closely. They whispered among themselves. Some still judged Amma harshly, but others began to soften as they heard the old woman's words. They realized this moment was not only about Amma, it was about everyone. It was about pride, respect, and the way people treated one another. Amma bowed her head deeply. Teach me, she said softly, though her voice trembled. I do not want to live with this pride anymore. Mame Efua smiled faintly, her wrinkles deepening. The first step has already begun. You have admitted your fault. That is harder than lifting a heavy stone. Now you must practice patience. Speak less, listen more. Respect those older than you and even those younger than you. For every person has worth. Her words spread through the air like wind. Mothers in the crowd held their children closer. Men looked at one another with thought in their eyes, and the young listened carefully, realizing that even they could learn something powerful that day. Amma felt her heart soften. She remembered how she had walked proudly through the marketplace, caring only for herself. She remembered how she had slapped Mame Efua without hesitation. The memory burned her with shame, but now it also lit a fire of determination inside her. She wanted to change. She wanted to be better. The old woman placed her hand gently on Amma's shoulder. Rise, my daughter, she said. Do not stay on your knees forever. Humility is good, but it must also give you strength. Walk with a new heart. Let people see the change in your actions, not just your words. Amma rose slowly to her feet. Her tears still flowed, but her spirit felt lighter. She looked at the crowd, at all the faces that had once been filled with scorn. Some still frowned at her, but others now looked at her with curiosity, perhaps even hope. The chief raised his staff high. Let this gathering remind us all, he said. Respect is not a gift we give only to those with names and titles. Respect is for all, for the old, for the young, for the poor, for the rich. Let us carry this lesson from Mame Efua in our hearts. The crowd responded with applause. The drummers struck their drums softly, marking the solemn but hopeful moment. Amma stood quietly beside Mame Efua, her heart still racing but calmer than before. She knew her journey was not complete. She had to earn back the respect she had lost, not with pride, but with humility and actions. But she also knew she had been given something precious, a second chance. That evening, when the gathering ended and people began to leave, Amma walked home slowly. The air felt cooler, the streets quieter. Every face she passed reminded her of the weight she carried, but also of the chance she now had to live differently. At her doorstep, she paused and looked up at the night sky. For the first time in many days, she did not feel empty. She felt guided. She felt as if Mame Efua's words had planted a seed in her heart. She whispered to herself, I will change. I will not waste this lesson. And with that, Amma stepped inside, ready to face tomorrow with a new heart. Amma's body shook as she stood before Mame Efua. Her tears streamed down, falling onto the dusty ground beneath her feet. She could no longer hide behind her pride, no longer pretend she was strong when her heart was weak. In front of the entire community, she dropped to her knees and bowed low. Her voice cracked as she cried, Please forgive me. I was blind with anger. I have shamed myself and I have shamed you. The crowd gasped softly. To see Amma, the proud young woman who once held her head higher than others, kneeling before the elder, was something no one had ever expected. Murmurs rippled through the people. Some pitied her, some doubted her change, and others simply watched, waiting for what the elder would say. Mame Efua, calm as the evening breeze, slowly reached out her wrinkled hand. She touched Amma's shoulder gently and said, "My daughter, rise. Forgiveness is not heavy, it is lighter than the anger you have carried." Amma looked up, her eyes swollen from crying. But Mame Efua was smiling softly, her face warm and kind. She continued, "True strength is not in pride but in humility. To bow your head when you are wrong, to admit your fault, to choose patience when your heart burns, this is the strength that builds a person. You have begun that path today." The crowd fell into silence. Even the children who had been restless moments ago grew still. The chief nodded firmly and his staff tapped the ground once, echoing through the space. Amma rose slowly, trembling but standing tall, though her head was still bowed in respect. She wiped her tears with the edge of her cloth, and for the first time, she felt as though her pride had finally left her. She felt lighter, freer, as though a great stone had been lifted from her heart. The people around her began to murmur again, but their voices had changed. Some said, "She has learned her lesson." Others whispered, "Perhaps she can change." Amma stood quietly, letting their words wash over her. For once, she did not rise in defense, she did not argue, she did not let anger lead her. She simply listened. And in that moment she realized listening was also a kind of strength. Mame Efua spoke again, her voice reaching far into the crowd. "Let this day be remembered. Not for the slap but for the change it brought. Every mistake can be turned into wisdom if the heart is willing." The word struck Amma deeply. She knew she could not erase what she had done in the marketplace. People would remember it. But perhaps, as Mame Efua said, they could also remember what came after. The growth, the humility, and the lessons. That night Amma could not sleep. She lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word the elder had spoken. She thought of her pride, of the sharpness of her tongue, of the anger that had always come so quickly. She thought of the slap, how it had brought shame not only to herself but to her family, her neighbors, and the whole community. Yet she also thought of how the elder had lifted her up instead of pushing her down. Mame Efua could have punished her, could have demanded the chief cast her aside, but instead she offered wisdom. That kindness burned in Amma's heart more than any anger ever could. In the days that followed, Amma began to change. She no longer stormed through the marketplace with her chin raised high. Instead, she walked slowly, greeted people gently, and listened more than she spoke. At first, people were suspicious. They whispered behind her back, "Is this the same Amma? She acts humble now, but for how long?" Amma heard their whispers, but she did not let them sting. Instead, she remembered Mame Efua's words, patience and humility. She answered greetings with a smile, helped elders carry baskets, and even sat quietly with children to hear their laughter. Little by little, the people began to see that her change was real. One afternoon as she walked past the well, she saw Mame Efua sitting nearby, resting under a tree. Amma hurried over and knelt before her, not out of shame this time but out of respect. "Mother," she said softly, "your words have given me a new heart. I will never forget them." Mame Efua touched her cheek and smiled again. "Remember, Amma, humility is not something you show only when people are watching. It must live inside you every day in every moment. Let your life be the lesson now." Amma nodded, and for the first time in her life she truly understood. The story of the slap spread across the town, but it did not remain a tale of disgrace. Over time, it became a story of change. People began to tell their children, "Do not be like Amma before the gathering. Be like Amma after." And Amma herself lived each day carefully, not with the weight of shame, but with the strength of humility guiding her steps. In her heart, she knew she would never again let anger control her. She had been given a second chance and she would not waste it. And so, the slap that once brought her humiliation became the turning point of her life. It was not the end of her story but the beginning of a better one. The end.